All right, calculus, welcome to page 3, diagnostic test, analytic geometry. In your review unit packets, notice that this is the second video. Why is there a second video? Because I made a big boo-boo in the first video trying to go over 4a. So that is why there's a second video here. Anyway, we're not going to make this mistake. On number 4, given point A and B, a line is going to go through A, B. What's the slope of that line? The slope is difference of the y's over difference of the x's. I always like to do the bigger y minus the smaller y because then I don't have to deal with a negative right off the bat. That doesn't mean there's not going to be a negative slope. There will be a negative slope here. All right, so difference of the y's over, now because I started with 4, with the first order pair with that y, I have to start with the first order pair with that x over difference of the x's. This is 16 over negative 12, which is a negative 4/3. Previous video, I said 8 over negative 12, a negative 2/3, and everything else was going to be wrong. All right, there is a little bit of a glare I can see right around here from the lights, but we're going to do the best we can, okay? I think things will be improving, but we got to try out a few things here first. Anyway, the slope is a negative 4/3. Now, B says, what's the equation of the line that goes through AB? It is a line goes on forever. That's why it gets that at the top. Line, little symbol there. So first off, y is a negative 4/3 x plus b. All right, pick an ordered pair to use. I'm going to use that one right there, A. There's really not a great one. You're going to have fractions, so nope. Y is 4. Y is 4. X is a negative 7. All right, and we're looking for B. Now, okay, I can't spend all day talking about the algebra that goes in or the arithmetic that goes into every question. Only rule in calculus has got to be almost perfect, and everything you've been taught before, or be able to learn it quickly. This is going to be a 28/3 plus b. Now I'm going to rewrite 4 as 12 over 3. Subtract 28/3 from both sides. Look at that. B is a negative 16/3. So y equals a negative 4/3 x minus 16 over 3. That is the equation of my line. Let's move that over. There you go. That is the equation of my line. Now, what are the intercepts? Well, the y-intercept is staring right at you. The y-intercept is y is a negative 16/3. The x-intercept, 0 is a negative 4/3 x minus 16/3. Move 16/3 over. Let's see, where are we? You can't see that, so that's the x-intercept right there. So let's bring it on over here. You can see it then. Okay, I'm going to move the 16/3 over. Is equal to a negative 4/3 x. If you multiply both sides by 3, then we get negative 4. Yep. We get negative 4. So that's the x-intercept. X equals negative 4. Again, if I ever make a mistake, let me know. It is a good chance you'll have to spot one and correct me later. But that looks pretty good for the x-intercept when y is 0 when it crosses the x-axis. Okay, on this next one here, let's take a look. C is find the midpoint of A, B. Find the midpoints of A, B. So it goes through those 2 points. C is midpoints of A, B. Now, it has to be a line segment if there's going to be a middle. Now, midpoint formula, midpoint is a point. It's just the average. It's the middle. So the middle of something, if you got a 90 and 100 on a test, you've taken 2, your average would be the middle of those 2 scores, a 95. 90 plus 100 divided by 2. So I take my x's, I add them up, divided by 2. Take my y's, I add them up, divided by 2. All right, so I've got negative 2 over 2, which is a negative 1, comma, negative 8 over 2, which is a negative 4. So my midpoint would be negative 1, negative 4. Then D, find the length of segment AB. So the distance from A to B. Now I teach the distance formula like this. The distance formula is just the Pythagorean theorem, believe it or not. Okay, I show the distance formula like that. Distance squared is equal to the x distance you travel square plus the y distance you traveled square. Now look at that versus this. You might, what's it like, x2 minus x1, where you finish minus where you start type of deal. I've had too many good students not remember that on the ACT, and then they forfeit a pretty easy question. Because if I just took the square root of both sides, that is what I would have here, okay? X distance that you travel is where you began minus where you, where you end minus where you start. Now here I don't have to deal, here I have to deal with negatives and squaring negatives, and sometimes we make a mistake with that. Here I do not have to deal with squaring negatives, and I'll show you why. So distance squared is the x distance that you travel from -7 to 5. 7 miles into Missouri, and you're going 5 miles into Illinois. Okay, that's a distance of 12. If you're at exit 7 in Missouri, then you go to exit 5 in Illinois. It took you 7 miles to get to the Mississippi River, then you crossed, and you went 5 more miles. That is a distance, an x distance of 12, and I'm going to square it. Plus 4 to -12, you travel to 16 in the y direction. So distance squared is 144 plus 256. Distance squared is 400. Take the square root of 400, you get 20. Distance is 20. All right, find an equation of the perpendicular bisector. So first off, from the previous, I should have written this down from the previous one. I believe all we care about that is that -4/3. Yes. The slope was a -4/3. Okay, let's talk about perpendicular bisector. Whew. It's kind of an honors geometry question here. So in E, find the equation of the perpendicular bisector. Well, let's talk about what that means. Here is my XY coordinate plane. A would be about right there, and B about right there. All right. Perpendicular bisector would go in the middle, and we found that the middle was what? -1, -4, which, roughly there. Let's call that the middle. Okay, and it would make a right angle. So not only would it go through the middle, so this has to go through -1, -4, because it's the bisector. It's also perpendicular. Remember, perpendicular slopes have the opposite reciprocal. Perpendicular lines have the opposite reciprocal slope. So I know my perpendicular bisector is going to have a slope of 3/4, and I know it has to go through, now points, -1, -4. Okay, so y equals 3/4 x plus b. There's my x, there's my y. -4 is equal to 3/4 times -1 plus b. This is a -3/4. This is a -16/4. And 3/4 to both sides. My y-intercept would be a -13/4. So my equation would be y equals 3/4 x minus 13/4. Great. This is a great question overall. This whole part 4. Finally, find an equation of a circle for which AB is a diameter. Ooh. So let me, before we go on, actually, this is important. This is not as important. This is good. Let's get rid of this part in blue. So now I have a circle that goes through. So AB is a diameter. So what we got here? Okay, so circle roughly like that. So here's my center. My center in this part F here would be a -1, -4. Just like before, I don't, well, I've got 2 different points it goes through, so let me use b here. I know what the center is, so it's going to be x plus 1 squared plus y plus 4 squared is equal to the radius squared. We don't have any info about the radius. Now, I do know the total distance, right? Ooh, folks, be smart here. Don't we know the total distance between those 2 points is 20? That would be the diameter. So if the diameter is 20, then the radius has got to be 10, which means 10 squared would be 100. Now let's check that. Let's make sure. Okay, so let's say I didn't know what the radius was. I'd plug 5, and I would plug 12 in, or negative 12 in. 5 in for x, negative 12 in for y. 5 plus 1, let's make sure it checks out, plus negative 12 plus 4 is equal to radius squared. 6 squared plus a negative 8 squared, be careful. 36 plus 64 is in fact 100, and I knew that the radius had to be 10 because I knew the distance between the 2 points was 20, and that was the diameter. All right, so here's the equation right here. X plus 1, all of it squared, plus y plus 4, all of it squared is equal to 100. All right, folks, that is page 3. This is going to be a lesson that everybody does on their own, and I'm hoping that that is an okay video for us to start. And this is Yak Math Videos, signing out.